Hey there, my name is Trevor, and today I'll be narrating the story of Tyler Donovan, an Army veteran who clinically died for over 10 minutes during a near-death experience. In that brief yet transformative moment on the other side, Tyler received 3 monumental messages that forever altered his perspective on life. These revelations opened his eyes to the profound connections that bind us all and the deeper truths of our existence. Before we get started, make sure to leave a comment with your name and city for good luck. With that said, let's listen to Tyler's story. Today I want to tell you about a real death I went through. My name is Tyler Donovan. Let's jump right in. I was exposed to dangerous chemicals while I was in the service. Over time, these chemicals caused autoimmune diseases in me. I felt terrible because these diseases slowly hurt every part of my body, from my bones to my heart. Things got very bad for me on March 17, 2017, when I had a critical amount of heart failure. My end-stage chronic heart failure had been getting worse for a while, but this was a lot worse. I fought for my life in the emergency room for 7 hours before being moved to the intensive care unit. There, I again fell into a dangerous state of persistent ventricular tachycardia, which means my heart rate stayed too high for too long. That's when I felt death coming, and I knew it was my time. I prayed through the whole thing, but at one point I closed my eyes and begged God, please just take me. This pain is too much for me to handle anymore. As someone who doesn't give up easily, this was very different for me. The pain was too much to bear. I was totally down and for the first time really ready for everything to stop. When I closed my eyes, I felt like I was dying, which was really cool. My body shook really hard and hit the ground hard. Then there was a sharp pain wave. Faster than I could remember though, and the pain was worse than anything I had ever felt. It was over in an instant. The weirdest thing was that it wasn't even painful. It was just gone. I left right then, as my body shook and popped. I felt like my soul left me, and I ended up in a dark cave. There was no longer any noise or chaos in the hospital room. Instead, there was a feeling of love and joy that filled the air around me. It seemed like these feelings were permeating the whole space. But there I was, looking into the blackness, and it was hard to understand. It was huge, like deep space, but there were no stars, planets, or sun there. It was just blackness. I could still see into it, though. The interesting thing about this gap was that it almost seemed to be calling me to get closer. I was filled with such love and joy, and the void seemed to promise that if I went into it, I would stay that way and feel like everything would be okay. But I knew that the blank wasn't where the love and joy I was feeling came from, even though it was tempting. Something was clearly trying to get my attention, but it didn't seem like it was trying to help me. It felt like it was trying to trick me. This can't be it, I thought as I looked at the empty space. It wasn't just a thought, though. It was more like, this can't be it without Jesus. If he wasn't there, I didn't want heaven or forever. I knew he hadn't left me even as I was slipping away because I could feel his presence before I died. That's why I knew something was wrong. The love and happiness that hit me at that moment were different from anything I had felt before. They were much deeper. The moment I realized this wasn't it, I became aware of a light behind me. In a way, I had always seen this light because I could see deep into the dark void, even though it was completely empty. I had a strong desire to turn toward the light behind me as I became more aware of it. The interesting thing is that I didn't need to turn. As soon as I turned my attention to the light, I was facing it, but I never lost sight of the dark space. There was no way for me to see anything else. I could see both the light and the darkness at the same time. But the light naturally took over my attention as I looked at it more. The light became my main focus. The void stayed with me, almost like a background presence. But the light pulled me in with all of my being. I really wanted to be with the light as I looked at it. It was so far away that it was hard to figure out how far away this light was. Just as soon as I said I wanted to be there, though, I was moved right away. What's interesting is that I didn't feel any inertia, speed, movement, wind on my face, or any other sensations that would have told me how fast I had moved. I knew I had moved, though. It was amazing that I could remember every step, even though I didn't feel like I had taken them. What struck me most was the lack of time as we know it. It felt like a long time even though everything was happening so quickly. No way to tell how long this trip had taken because time didn't seem to exist in the same way it does in real life. As I stood in front of the light, I couldn't take my eyes off of it because it was so beautiful. It was different from any light I had ever seen, but it wasn't unpleasant or painful to look at. It was beyond my wildest dreams of creativity, but it made me feel amazed instead of uncomfortable. The light felt amazing. It was seeping into me and making me feel full of love. This light was love itself, and it filled my whole being. As I took it all in, I noticed something amazing. My intelligence had gone through the roof. I learned things all of a sudden that I had never learned before. I knew facts about history that I had never learned, and all of my life memories came back to me clearly and vividly. It felt like I had turned into a machine that could handle a lot of things at once. It felt like having dozens of windows open on your computer and being able to easily manage them all. The only difference is that I didn't have to do anything by hand, it was all just there. I tried to find the edges of the light as I looked into it. There was no end in sight. I looked left, right, up, and down. The coolest thing was that my view wasn't limited. At the same time that I looked to the left, I could see to the right, up, down, and straight ahead. I could focus on the light and still see everything in my field of view. It was like driving a car and being able to see the scenery go by. And this is the most interesting part. The light kept getting bigger as far as I could see. It got bigger, and I looked for a long time but couldn't find the end. It was huge, endless, and vast. It didn't have any edges, and I don't think I could have found one no matter how long I looked. I had a strong feeling from this light that it was endless, so big that it would last forever. I was amazed that such a bright light didn't hurt my eyes, and that's when I knew this was God. As soon as I realized that, God spoke. "You can come in," he told her. With no thought, I jumped toward him. I was so desperate to be with him that I couldn't hold it in. Now I knew this was God, but there was nobody there. Since the light didn't have a body, I'm not sure if it was just his love showing up in this way, or if it was part of his spirit. I do know that this light was his love. It was a direct sign of who he is. After that, I was in this light, and felt his love pouring into me like a strong river. It was strong and powerful, but my soul was open to it all. There were no obstacles or things that would stop the flow of that love. It was really cool. That's how God's love felt, like putting on a warm blanket right out of the dryer on a cold day and feeling safe, secure, and completely comforted. It wrapped around me in the most beautiful and soothing way, and words could never really describe it. An amazing understanding came over me as I continued to walk through this deep love. I started to see more than just my life. I saw the past, including things I had never seen or experienced myself, as well as all kinds of information and wants. It felt like everything was right there in front of me, clear and present. I started to understand how humans are often sidetracked by a lot of different thoughts and ideas. In real life, we can only handle one or two things at a time. For some, it may be a bit more, but not like what I was going through. It was easy for me to understand everything here at once. It made me understand that God is like this. It became very clear that God doesn't think in bits and pieces like we do. Instead, he has one thought that includes everything. All of our information, all of history, all of our ideas, all of our memories, mine, yours, and everyone else's. And that one thought that covers everything is Jesus Christ. I said, I want to see Jesus, as soon as I understood this. At that very moment, the light let me see a very large room. There were a lot of people in this room. I didn't look past this room, but I could have because I could see everything. I could see these beings from all sides, front and back at the same time, and not miss a single detail. It seemed like I could see forever. It seemed like this room was just the beginning, like a waiting room before something even bigger, even though I could see everything in it. I saw one being that stood out from the others because it was brighter than the rest. These beings looked like human torsos and were filled with an amazing love and brightness. The light around them was amazing, but not as strong or blinding as the light in the middle, which was where all the love and happiness came from. Without a question, I knew that this main light was Jesus. Love came from him like a river and filled me up completely. It felt like I was a straw that was always drawing from an endless source. The liquid runs continuously, and the straw is never empty, just like when you use a straw to drink from a cup. In the same way, Jesus' love felt like it was endless and always running into and through me. The love kept coming to me and filling me up all the time. It never stopped or went away. It was always brand new, bright, and alive. This love wasn't just for me. It went all the way through me to heaven. This love would never run out and would always fill us up, so it was clear that it would last forever. It amazed me to think that we would experience this love in brand new and exciting ways every day for all time. It had an endless number of dimensions, and each one showed something fresh, deep, and even more beautiful. He loved me more than any other love I had ever known, and I knew that we would always find more of it. I asked Jesus, "Jesus, I want to see your face." When I saw him and felt his love surround me, as soon as I told him what I wanted, everything came together, and I saw his face. All the beings around him seemed to take on human forms. I could see them, but my attention was only on Jesus. Everything else was on the edges, like small features in the background. Everyone always wants to know if I saw loved ones like Grandma or others. I have a feeling I did, but I can't be sure because I was so focused on Jesus. I can't describe how beautiful his face was. The way he looked at me was filled with love and kindness. As I stood in front of him, I knew I was unworthy because I was a sinner, but his eyes did not judge me. They saw only grace. Even though I had felt so sorry for my sins my whole life, it didn't matter at that moment because of his endless kindness. What was strange, though, was that I couldn't keep a picture of his face in my mind. It was like a movie. It was moving and changing all the time. It's like when you turn the pages of a book of pictures and they move around. That's how it felt. New pictures of his face kept coming into my mind in real time, and I couldn't settle on a single one. His face kept showing me something new as I tried to remember what I had just seen. It seemed like his soul, his love, and his being were too changing and endless to be summed up in a single picture. Realizing that I couldn't hold on to a fixed picture of Jesus' face was a very deep experience. I asked God why he made me feel that way. In the end, I realized it didn't matter what he looked like. What made him special was more important than how he looked. He was the love I felt for him, a love that is so full and perfect that it fills the soul. He looked at me with such deep kindness that I could feel his forgiveness wash over me. We started to talk about my whole life, going over all of my acts, both good and bad. It felt like an in-depth review of everything I had done, and the beings around us saw it happen. Surprisingly, their appearance didn't make me feel bad. I was sure they saw everything I did. Instead, I felt a better kind of shame, one that came from learning and growing, not from judging myself. As Jesus looked at me at that very moment, his love and kindness filled my being and healed the wounds I had caused myself. The shame I felt turned into hate for my sins, showing me how bad my actions really were. There were many ways that my sins had hurt other people as well as my connection with Jesus. Knowing that every lie I told and every selfish thing I did hurt more than just me, I knew they hurt him and other people very badly. It hurt and freed me at the same time when I realized this. I could see all of my decisions and how they would affect someone else. As I thought back on my life during this time, I knew I was sorry for some things, but I was more upset about the things I hadn't done and the reasons I gave for them. There were times when I thought it was okay to be angry, especially after being insulted. After going through some really horrible things, I wasn't the type to let people get away with it. I would fight back, and a lot of the time it wasn't fair. During those times of reflection with Jesus, I saw very clearly how my acts, which were based on my need for revenge, hurt him. I thought those reasons were good, but seeing how they affected other people made me face the truth of my decisions. Being aware that my acts hurt Jesus as well as the people around me was very painful. In this situation, time was different from anything I had ever known. It wasn't linear like life is for us. Everything seemed to happen at the same time. It seemed like all of time had been squished into a single point, like a tiny dot on a piece of paper. Everything that had happened or would happen was there at the same time. Even though I was telling my story in order, This point of view helped me understand it much better. At that moment, I understood that all of my experiences were linked and not limited by time. Instead, they all existed in an eternal now. This knowledge helped me understand how my choices affected others and how those effects would last. It wasn't just about the past. It was about how every action and silence affected everything else. I knew that my anger and feelings of unfairness were part of a bigger picture of life that included God's love and kindness, so I felt like I had to make peace with them right away. When I thought about the image I had of my great-grandmother's death as a child, the feelings I had came flooding back. I clearly remembered seeing my aunts and uncles cry, and I could feel how sad they were. She was liked by many, and her death really shocked me, even though I was only 6 years old. I was too sad to talk to my parents about it on the long drive home that night because I didn't want to add to their pain. I remember having a strong desire to pray when we got home. For what seemed like the first time in a long time, I got down on my knees. This prayer was an honest talk with God that seemed to go on for a long time for someone so young. In that moment, I felt a warm feeling like God was hugging me, and I knew that He heard my prayer and gave me a reassuring promise that He would answer it. That night, I slept soundly because I didn't have to worry about the things that had been bothering me on the drive. Before this event, I don't think I had thought about that moment again. Now that I was standing next to Jesus, I had to ask Him, did this really happen? Did you hear that prayer? His confirmation made me feel so happy and relieved. That deep moment made the bond I felt with Him even stronger. What really amazed me was how we were talking. There were no sounds I could hear. Instead, there was silence. But I could feel His thoughts deeply, as if my mind and His were joined. I could also pick up on the thoughts of the other beings around us, weaving a web of understanding that went beyond words. It was an amazing realization of how we are all linked. We were all experiencing the divine presence as part of a bigger, more unified whole. During that deep relationship with Jesus, I felt like everything around me was empty and full of meaning at the same time. Even though no words were spoken, I could understand what everyone was thinking and feeling. Each message was very clear, even though a lot was going on in my mind. It seemed like time and space didn't exist, and I could fully understand what was being said. God asked me, "Why do you want to go back?" It really hit me. Not only was this an easy question, but it also made me think about why I was coming back to this life. My family was the first thing that came to mind as a reason I could give. I thought about my job and how I could make the world a better place. But these reasons, no matter how good they seemed, didn't feel real. I realized I still wasn't getting the most important truth. Putting God first is the right way to do things. I felt an enormous wave of love fill my being as this realization hit me. It was a love that I could not describe, unlike any other I had felt. It felt endless and deep that I would gladly go through any hardship for all time just to be in its company. That's how Jesus loved us deeply and without any thought of Himself. This love changed the way I saw things. I realized that in order to really live, I had to bring that love back into the world. It became clear to me that accepting this divine love would make my life so much better. If I could connect with that limitless love, it would make my life better and the lives of everyone around me better as well. I felt a deep desire to share and show this love in everything I do after that beautiful realization. That's when I realized it was His love that made me want to come back and share it with other people. I knew this was the thing that would make Him happiest. For God, having as many people as possible in heaven with Him was the most important thing in the world, which is why I told Him I wanted to come back and share His love with others. I wanted to love others. "Yes, that's it," He said. "That's the main point." This lesson was meant for me, but I think it's true for everyone. Our job is to love God and share that love with others. Like I said before, everything happened like a point of light. The next important event was when He gave me His last orders before sending me back. He gave 3 very important instructions. I should have prayed more. This wasn't just talking about regular prayers, though those are important and vital to keep our human structure and discipline. They keep us on track, which is important because we tend to stray. But they are also very pretty. He told me to keep praying, But he also said I should pray more through my deeds by doing good things for other people. In other words, he told me to live out my prayers by doing good things for other people. He had already shown me how he saved me, so these actions wouldn't save me. But having his love inside us makes us want to share it, stay in touch, and act out of that love. You can make someone else's day better by keeping the environment clean. For example, as I walked down the street, I picked up a piece of trash to throw it in the trash. It might not seem like a big deal, but I think it's a beautiful example of how simple things can be. We don't need to do amazing things that get everyone's attention. Our attention should be on God. God will respect your desire to make the world a better place by picking up trash out of love for Him and other people. There is no doubt in His mind that love exists. Besides this, He told me to accept pain with joy. This idea is especially hard to understand, especially after going through a horrible death. It was unbearably painful, and I wasn't with my family during those last moments because I was by myself. Still, I knew that this was God, who came down from heaven and died on the cross. His whole life was filled with pain. He was born in a barn to poor parents in the most basic conditions you can imagine. Even though he was the king of the universe, he decided to live like everyone else so he could really understand what it's like to be human. He showed that even though he was perfect, he still took on the cross to save us. This thought hit me. How could I ever get away from my own cross? This doesn't mean that everyone will have to carry the same cross. Not everyone has to die a horrible death like I did, and not everyone has to go through a heart donation like I did 2 years later. Everybody's journey is different, and pain shows up in different ways. It's a natural part of being human to go through hard times. For example, if you eat too many tacos and get a stomachache, that's not God's fault. That's just how life works. The good news is that God can turn our pain into something good if we let Him. Being able to accept the results of our deeds in the natural world while giving it back to God is what joyful suffering is all about. We can tell Him how much we love the good things that are still in our lives, even if they are making us feel bad, and ask Him to use those good things for a better good. He will answer. It was hard for me to understand the part of the Bible where Paul says that his pain completes Christ's suffering. I wasn't sure of the exact words, but the idea is that our part in pain is part of a bigger picture. What more can be done than what perfection has already done? Being open to our events and accepting them is what makes us live up to this calling. Through His own journey, Christ showed us this. He was in deep prayer in the yard, and I could clearly hear how He was telling me these things. In my mind, those memories were not just vague thoughts, they were real. There, He went through a lot of pain and gave up everything in the end. It was clear to me that this was also the right road for me to take. He told me that I would have to go through even more pain when I came back, more than I had before I died. This included all the pain I had already been through, as well as any more problems that life would throw at me. He told me I would get a new heart, but I didn't understand at the time that it would be through a heart donation. I thought I would be miraculously healed instead. Anyway, I knew there would be more pain ahead, and I found myself accepting this truth. In fact, I started to see how all the pain I had been through before I died was a huge blessing. He had healed those scars with love, and I don't think I would have ever felt love in the same way if I hadn't been through so much pain. I could only really understand how deep something so beautiful was when I saw something so horrible next to it. Sharing His love was the last thing He told me to do. This may sound easy, but it can be really hard for people. Many times, the things other people do hurt us. Sometimes they do really upsetting things. Sin is common, and while we should never excuse or ignore it, it's also important to know that we should never think of the person who did it as bad. Instead, we should show that we are aware that someone is acting badly and kindly encourage them to change their ways. To share love, you need to be wise and know when to speak up and when to keep quiet. To really share that love, we need to meet people where they are and help them experience love in a way that changes them and makes them better. Even though this is a hard job, God can use even our mistakes for our good if we do it with the sincere goal of sharing love. He told me I didn't have to be afraid to share His love because it would be Him who grows the seeds I plant. At that moment, He told me to go back. The image of Jesus faded from my sight as I turned to go back to my tunnel. That was the only time I could no longer see the beauty of heaven. As I walked through the light, it slowly got bigger, which led me back the way I came. I saw my tunnel, and while I thought I caught a glimpse of other tunnels nearby, I was mostly focused on mine. I thought I was in a dark void until I got to the end of my tunnel and saw my hospital room. My body was lying there. As if I could see through my own eyes, I could take in everything around me and also see the back of my head. The scene was very busy. There were about 15 to 20 people in the room and a few more outside. They were all busy with different tasks, rushing to get equipment and take care of their own duties, which made the atmosphere chaotic. Even though I knew that when I got back I would have to deal with the pain that was waiting for me, I felt a deep joy that could not be taken away. When I went back into my body, I snapped back into it naturally. I didn't need anyone to show me how to do it. It felt like it came naturally. As soon as I came back to myself, I felt like a wall had gone up around the cave. This feeling was wiped out by the rush of things from real life, the chaos in the room, my worries and fears, and a huge pain that went through me. But I knew that the way to God was still clear. It was just these other things that were getting in the way of my ability to fully connect with Him. I knew I had to learn how to deal with these things that were getting in the way. I opened my eyes and tried to sit up right away, but I was tied down. The medical staff was busy shocking me and doing other things to make sure I was safe. Masks were put over my face, and other things were put on my head to keep my brain cool and track its activity. Surprisingly, I had been dead for 10 minutes. My heart had stopped beating, and my brain had stopped working at all. But when I came back to my body, I didn't seem to have any brain damage, which is normal after being dead for so long. "Did I just die?" I asked the doctor as I looked up at him. But the mask made it so he couldn't fully hear me. As he got closer, I could tell by the look on his face that he was about to pronounce me dead and call the time of death. This was especially true since they had just taken the Lucas machine off of me, which had broken a couple of my ribs. It was true that the pain was very bad. I asked again, "Did I just die?" while the doctor looked at my face. "Yeah, you just died," he said. Because I was a therapist, I had never believed in near-death experiences, so I needed that medical proof. I always thought they were just caused by neurochemical reactions, a rush of chemicals in the brain that made memories come back very clearly. Still, I hadn't lost conscious thought from the moment I died until I came back to my body from heaven. Yes, I was fully aware the whole time, even though my brain was dead. I was making new memories in heaven, which didn't seem possible. The things I went through were beyond what a normal person could think. This made it clear that my brain could not have created these experiences while it wasn't working. This realization flipped what I thought I knew and how I was trained. I couldn't help but think about how wrong my teachers had been. They were making me question everything I thought I knew. After that, the medical staff kept working on me. A new pacemaker was put in after I had surgery. It's interesting that I lived with a heart that wasn't really beating for 2 years. They showed me the different parts of my heart when they did the heart transplant and cut open my old heart for a test. They pointed out 5 or 6 places and told me that my heart wouldn't have been able to work without those parts or if any of them were broken. Those places had deep scars, and my heart's smooth muscle no longer had the ability to contract, which made it beat in strange ways. The hospital staff said it was a miracle, but you now know it was God's help. I was about to give up when God stepped into my life and pulled me back. He gave me another chance. That's how beautiful our God is. When I looked into His eyes, I saw kindness. He wasn't judging me for my sins. Instead, He was saving me from them. Why did I choose that path in that dark void? Because I loved Him. He turned to face me and asked me to be with Him, to bask in that light and to see Jesus. These thoughts came from a deep love inside me. They were my soul letting me know that this is where I belonged. Because I connected with Jesus, who gave me love without expecting anything in return, I learned and understood things I never thought possible. That's the great thing about our God. His kindness has no conditions. We only need to ask for it and love Him back. That's all He wants.